My mother tells me that by 5 years old, I had decided definitely to become a concert pianist. I think she had decided sometime earlier. The story goes that while I was in the womb, she played the piano continuously to give me a head start. And, evidently, it paid off. My mother was my first teacher, and I've never doubted her methods. After all, she introduced me to Bach. Recognize this quotes movie? Stay tuned to find out, or check out the title of this episode of Talking Pictures Trivia.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends, and today's host, Nick, and with me is...
Tom
and KJ.
Additionally, joining us as a guest this week is...
Ryan.
Thanks for joining us. Ryan works in the film industry, helping to release independent films. Ryan has joined us for Time Crimes, Memories of Matsuko, and World on a Wire. Ryan still conveniently likes movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. In round 1, each question is worth 1 point, and in round 2, each question is worth 2 points, although it is a Tom episode, so I cannot guarantee that. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we followed up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. Tom, tell us about today's movie.
Today we are going back to 1993. Another movie we've covered on this show is The Fugitive, also from 1993. While not directly competing with The Fugitive, François Girard's movie 32 Short Films About Glenn Gould was released in a few film festivals and had a limited theater release in the USA. So, 32 Short Films About Glenn Gould is the most direct film we've done in terms of its title to its content. It is, in fact, 32 short films about the Canadian pianist Glenn Gould. And each one takes on I wouldn't say a little aspect of his life. They take on little characteristics, little modes, little tones, sometimes bits of plot, but it's rather different from a conventional biofilm. It has a more pointillist image that it's tending towards. Nick, if you had one word to describe 32 short films about Glenn Gould, what would it be?
Why? Ryan?
Contrapuntal. KJ?
Staccato.
And my word would be polyphonic.
It's time for question 1.
So the first question is nice and easy, I thought. You poor people. Except Ryan, who has a soul, but that's, we share that in common, I suppose. Describe the frame of the film.
Like the aspect ratio?
No. The frame, how the movie is framed in terms of beginning end.
In what short film was that discussed, the frame?
Well, it's the thing itself, right? It's the short films themselves.
Locked in.
Locked in.
Are you, KJ? Are you really?
Yeah, I think I know the frame.
All right. If you guys don't know this one, it's going to be a long episode.
I'm locked in.
Oh, okay. I thought this
or
was
maybe
going...
it'll be a short episode.
I thought this was going to be the beach ball that was pitched for the first pitch. But we'll start it off. Nick, what do you have?
I kind of locked in prematurely there.
Okay.
The frame is his life.
Do you need a definition of frame? It's like it's what it's
no
at the beginning and the end.
About.
It's with something in a book, movie, what have you, that's at the beginning and at the end that's repeated.
Oh yeah, okay, that's easy. He's like in the Arctic tundra or something, walking in a cold area. It starts in the beginning that way and ends that way.
Okay, KJ, what do you have?
Yeah, so technically this is 1/16 of the movie, right? So I have it's framed by bleak and tundrous shots.
Okay. And Ryan, what do you have?
Now I'm sorry that I made fun of you guys because I'm the one that's going to get it wrong.
Oh,
I was going to say the framing is like a riff on his Goldberg variations, and so the 32 short films connecting to his performance of the 32 Goldberg variations. So that's the frame.
all right. Oh, here's the thing. Ryan is actually the most right and wrong. So in the beginning, yes, we hear the aria from the Goldbergs, right? From the 56 recording, I think it is. But the last shot doesn't actually return to it. I think the last shot is a Beethoven sonata. Oh, it's from the Art of the Fugue. So it's Bach again. Yeah. It's from the art.
Fugue.
It's in the. You know what? I'm going to give everybody points because Ryan got the music, and that was kind of part.
I got confused when they were going with the aspect ratio. That's what really threw me.
I know
off.
Maybe we would have won if it was the aspect ratio.
I don't know what the aspect ratio is. Personally.
No, but I'm saying like I actually thought it was more complicated than where did it start and where did it end.
Oh, no. I wanted to make it simple because you seem to hate it so much. So I just want to reduce it. But I'm going to but because Ryan identified the music at the beginning of the movie, then yes, I'm going to give points.
I think that's fair. KJ.
So not to harp on this, what was the answer, Tom?
It was that. It was him walking towards the camera, walking away.
Oh! I thought it was Aria 1 and Bach 5 or whatever you had said for that.
It's also that. Yeah, it's the aria from the Goldberg variations, and it's from the Art of the Fugue by Bach, but or from that book anyway. Yeah, but there we go. So good start. and I
let everyone know that we actually somehow all got a point there.
You all got points. Part of it was pity, both for you and for myself.
For belaboring this any longer than it needed to.
Yeah, exactly. But I brought this forward to talk about the structure of this, which is obviously in the title. It is in the title, but it's also the most remarkable thing about this movie. What makes it stand out from other biopics. I was wondering how that structure, how you found it, how you think it's referencing other things, how it's kind of bringing in kind of intertextual context, etc.
It was choppy, Tom, right? It was choppy. And audience, when we watch these movies for the show, it's a little different than just sitting and enjoying the movie because trivia is coming. And that made it a little stressful because I don't know if you guys can see my show notes here, but I wrote down a little synopsis of each of the short films because I was, what am I going to remember?
I was going to thank you for that.
Yeah, that's so. I think in this context, it was a little stressful, Tom. It was a little much.
I was trying to figure out what Tom could even ask, and
Me
that's
too.
why I think I thought too deep on the first question.
I just sort of realized that I wasn't going to win this one, so I was just going to relax and go for the ride.
We all had that feeling, it seems like, but we'll see what happens. I think my thoughts when I was watching this film, I was trying to say like, oh, I enjoyed that short. I don't get that short. I said that a lot, by the way, but there were elements that I enjoyed. And I don't want to go into it in case they are any of the questions to come, because those ones I might actually get right.
It's interesting you guys all thought about them as actually short films. Like I kind of sort of took that as a gimmick, but it was more just like scenes from a life and, fade in, fade out. And they did have different, but it wasn't, I actually wondered when I first went into it, if each one was going to be directed by a different director. And so I'm like, and they're all the same actors. So I really, that choppiness was not as much as it could have been, that, how much they could have gone with that theme even deeper. But yeah, I thought, like it was sort of interesting, like thinking about the little that Eli was able to feed me about the differences between Baroque music and romantic music and how the different themes work. And so the movie just doing its best to kind of, I feel like it could have even been gone even deeper in terms of experimentalness as far as that went. So you guys were spared. This was completely watchable. What are you talking about?
But it seems the ones who enjoy it are the one who understand this background information or appreciation for this art form. So I know I was missing something. I didn't think it was bad. I just knew I was missing something because I'm not of the world that would enjoy this.
But even as just like a film, I thought, like, I first just keep thinking about all the generic biopics of that, it's like, oh, I just watched the Aretha Franklin one, and you're like, teeing up the themes. I'm seeing a father, I'm seeing, and so this one just like throwing you into it in different places, just relieved you of those cliches. And so even just as a film, knowing that's nothing about the music, I was just like, oh, this is so nice. It's just like the random things that this filmmaker found interesting about him.
Yeah, and I guess you're right, Ryan. There was kind of a few threads, right? It wasn't 32 different directors with different styles. There was the actual biopic where we're kind of going through different parts of his life. There's the cut to interview the people that knew him and were telling little stories. There was shots of the piano. There was very mechanical type shots, which I'll also include animation of music vibrations.
Yeah, it's a McLaren. It's from a separate film, but it's the screenwriter's earlier movie. It's a short film from that.
Okay, so in that case, it wasn't 32 separate short films. It was almost more of a weaving together of these of these different threads. However, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it would have been tough to watch a straight biopic of Glenn Gould, knowing what we now know about it. Like,
or it just would have been heavy-handed. You would have been like, mental illness or eccentric.
Yeah.
Let me like, how deep can we go?
I've never seen that
Exactly.
one before.
Like, is that pharmaceuticals that he's taking? Like, oh, did you just drop them on the floor?
Oh no,
and,
I'm so dreading
Yeah.
if that's a question. I am so dreading.
Oh, I don't know the names of all the drugs, so if don't let it go. If that's
I was cooking, and my wife came into the room, and she's like, "What are you watching?"
Yeah.
I'm like, I bet you Tom's gonna ask me how many of these drugs he took. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, but I would say I completely agree with Ryan. I think putting the musical metaphor aside, I think you're right, Ryan. What the short films do is kind of the short film structure, it avoids the cliches. It's that kind of way of avoiding the cliches. What's interesting, it also avoids the major moments in his life, right? We don't see the final concert, right? We hear him talking about it. We don't see him composing the music for Slaughterhouse-Five, the film, which he wrote a portion of the music for. We actually don't see him recording his most famous recordings. I mean, the Goldbergs are probably his two most famous recording sets. We don't see that at all. So the films, by kind of breaking up that the temptation to do like the beautiful mind or something like that, which I absolutely hate that movie. The short films not only prevent that kind of cliche, it's even more subversive. It takes away that traditional biopic fodder. And going to KJ's point, where KJ, I think you noticed, there are these kind of repeated things that are going on there, both in style, but also in theme. There's a lot of kind of themes that stay within a few short films and then are sort of dropped and moved on to something else. So you could think of, him kind of alone or alienated. And then we move on to, there's a 2 or 3 films that are more about exploring the sort of the polyphony, the kind of contrapuntal voices, how that kind of has bled into his life. And so I think the structure, I don't think you need to really have like studied the Trinitarian design of the Goldberg variations to kind of get the value that this structure is offering.
It's time for question 2.
Where was the last concert?
Locked in.
Locked in?
I'll lock in just because I'm never going to know it. Just going to have to wing it.
All right, Ryan, wing away.
For some reason, I'm just going to say Albany, New York.
Okay. Fair enough. KJ, what do you have?
So I don't know, but a lot of this movie, they talk about his time in Toronto, I think. Certainly Canada, but I'm going to go specific as to say Toronto. And I'm going to guess they might have been talking about his last concert or maybe the most exciting, but I'm going to go with Toronto.
Okay. Yeah, the question was, where was the last concert? Not any old concert. Nick, what do you have?
So he went on and on about the various hotels he stayed at and the different accommodations. I believe this is one of the stops. I'm hoping it was the last stop. The only thing making me think my answer is incorrect is the gentleman who he signs the autograph for did not have the accent of the place where I am about to say, but I'm going to say Vienna.
Okay, no points. Oh boy. It was LA.
Okay. It was an American guy.
I thought it was like a mid-market American city, like a second-tier city for some reason.
Yeah.
Poor Albany. Sorry, Albany.
You get cast Albany's as third tier. That's it's right up there with
LA.
Indianapolis.
LA's a big market.
LA is top tier. I guess
he's from Toronto, though. I knew that much.
Yeah, he's from outside of Toronto. Yeah, he is. That's where he wanted to kind of retire to, and did. So I brought this question forward, and I want to talk about something we kind of touched on it, but we're bringing that motif into our next variation, which is, what is this kind of? I got a painful look from KJ. What does this biopic leave in? What does it leave out? What did you find interesting about its additions and its subtractions from, let's say, the conventional?
I'll jump in because it's funny. The one thing I knew going into this, I had gone to see a chamber music performance actually just a couple weeks ago, and the pianist hummed. Oh, not hummed. It was her expression the whole time. It was like when she got into a dark part of the song, like she had a scowl on her face, and then she got into a lighter part and she started smiling. It was as if she'd like never heard the music before, and she was playing it in real time, and she's like, oh look, there's going to be a bright spot. And so it was just so funny to me. And so when I came, I went with Eli, and he's like, oh yeah, that's kind of a thing that, like, part of your performance is you and how much you bring to it. And he mentioned, he's like, Glenn Gould hummed along to all his songs. So the way that they kind of wove in just like the 2 or 3 facts I happened to know about him before then, which I just thought was kind of subtle, like it was like the journalist asking him the questions, and it didn't feel like it like kicked me between the eyes with like this major part. So I just thought that was nice that these delicate things were dropped in, and you either caught them or you didn't.
I had one of those moments in this film where he was talking about the people who are like crazy about piano music, and he pretty much was like, I don't like piano music. It just seemed like he only liked his, but he's not one of those fanatics who love piano music. So I thought that was kind of fun. We may have had that in common. No, that's not right. I actually do respect people who have the musical talent. I just don't have it.
Yeah, I'm trying to, so.
For those watching at home or listening at home, there's some serious beard stroking going on here.
Well, because it's an interesting question, Tom. Like, what was missing from this movie as a biopic, or what was there? And I feel like what was there was the small stuff. And maybe that's a better description of somebody, is how they interact with when he like doesn't let the maid leave because he just got one of his records in the mail, and he's like, no, you have to listen to this right now, because he wanted to connect with that person. He didn't just want to listen. And Nick, you brought up the autograph. So I think what they did include was the smaller interactions between him and the people that he met, and all the interviews of the people that knew him. They also kind of told small stories about things that he did, not the big grandiose stuff. So I would say the big stuff wasn't there, but the small stuff was, and maybe that's a better description of a person.
You think that leaving in the small stuff or only zooming in on that better gets at a person?
I think it might. I think it might tell you more about who they were, maybe not what they did, but how they approach things. And
yeah, it's interesting. I found the inclusion of the small stuff very often both interesting. Like, for example, his reflections on the afterlife. This idea of like that's something he would be open to. He was that type of person, and how he connected that to dreams. This small little detail that brought out a kind of a wealth. But it's also interesting how much those small details hide as well, right? We get nothing of the romantic, and there's clearly something romantic, right? At one point we hear a woman on the phone say, why haven't you called me again? Why don't you why don't you call me? And so there's these kind of interactions that have happened in his life that are also at a distance. This man is at a distance from us, even as we're kind of surrounded by this kind of candelabra of these little details, these little bits of it. So it seems like it's both saying like, yeah, we are the small details in our lives more than the grand moments.
How much did they know? And I understand that he's kind of a recluse, and like it seemed like he liked long conversations with people, but otherwise didn't reveal too much. So, I mean, how much is known about him as a person and his biography? I mean, was this film sort of reflecting that mystique?
Yeah, there's some people who came out, and I think really one or two women. One woman I know who came out and kind of was like, yeah, we had an affair.
So he wasn't gay.
No, she actually described him as, I think her term was, he was very heterosexual. So I don't know what that means, but yeah, but so he did have an affair. It's in looking at, he also produced a lot of media and a lot of, we saw a little bit of that in this, but he was quite fond of doing that. And it seemed as if the kind of strangeness that we see with him was somewhat cultivated. It was sort of, I wouldn't call it a gimmick, but it was, we might say, a somewhat marketing strategy. That's the impression I get. I think he was a lot more quote unquote normal. But then he does, wake up at 4 p.m. I mean, this is what happens when you become very successful at age 12 and are able to retire by age 32, right? You're always going to be a little not mainstream. Okay, here we are at the end of round 1. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a 3-way tie yet again at a point a person. Very good, very good, very good. We will be right back after these words from our sponsors to see who can take this down.
Hello, and welcome back to B-Side. Finally, it is B-Side. Today we're going to be talking about Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
We're going to be discussing the famous W.F. Murnau film from 1927, Sunrise.
The Icelandic movie from 2015, Rams. Juzo Itami's 1985 picture, Tam Popo. And today I'm going to be talking about a good old film that we just covered, and this is 1984's Ghostbusters.
Talking Pictures Trivia B-Side, wherever you listen to Talking Pictures Trivia.
And we're back. We're at the critical point of our episode where we ask the guest a key question. Ryan, if you could write your own sequel for 32 short films about Glenn Gould, what would it be? Really, what would it be?
Well, we are recording this the day after the Oscar ceremony. So a film that I truly would love to see would be something along the lines of 10 musical interludes about Will Smith. Take a moment and ponder that. Wouldn't that be interesting to break down Will Smith's life into from his music, like the songs that were at the period of his life, or some other motif to try to get at Will Smith, who we now know is a complicated, multifaceted individual.
That's a way to put it. Yeah.
I was going to come up with a title, but I think I'll reserve my 10 short films about but anyway, it's a fun structure, right? Because you can kind of use it to the short film thing. You can use it to tell a lot of people's story. Has anybody else done this, Ryan? Do you know, like that kind of fractured life?
I mean, definitely in a narrative way. I don't know if as a biopic I can think of anything offhand, but definitely, leaving large gaps in terms of time and moving forward. That's certainly done. Certainly more in foreign cinema than American. But but I definitely can't think of it as a biopic setup. So not that I know of, but mention it in the comments, anyone listening.
Would your Will Smith film jump forward in time or back in time, or would it be
Yeah, because
linear?
I feel like I don't need to see his whole life story. I just want to see like these, I don't need to see him growing up wherever he grew up, or unless it's relevant, I just think like this is a guy who has some issues now, and also a musician, also an artist. So why limit this kind of experimental structure to just someone coming of the classical world? It's just an interesting way to approach a complicated character. And my take on Glenn Gould before hearing that, from Tom, that he may have been sort of putting us on, was that he was kind of controversial in his eccentricity and maybe had mental illness, but maybe didn't. Certainly sort of had some issues with prescription drugs. And, he was not a perfect guy, even though he sort of, at least 30 years ago, went below the radar as to what other things could have been going on. And so now we have a much more public world and things don't go as much under the radar. So other actors, musicians who are experiencing some kind of mental illness seem to do it now on a much more public stage. So I just think, it's just an interesting way to approach exploring someone's character when we don't really need to know, much more about like, all the big things, like KJ was saying, like some of those things really aren't that important. What's more important or what makes them an interesting character are some of these controversies and contradictions.
It's time for question 3.
In the short film, The Crossed Paths, this is the film where you have a number of interviews, not just one. Who is the final interviewee? It ends on someone telling a story. Who is that final person?
Can you be more specific?
No. So in The Cross Paths, there's a bunch of people being interviewed, right? It's at the midpoint. I could even tell you which variation it is. Cross Paths is 14. So this is after the interview with the violinist, the French violinist, and before the playing of Opus 1. There's a collection of interviews, and I'll tell you who it begins with. It begins with the chambermaid, who says, there was a bunch of Jamaican chambermaids who thought he was a sexual lunatic, so they were scared of him, but I stuck around. There's a collection of voices there. And it ends with one person. We don't know. I'll give you the gender. It's a him. We don't know his name.
I'm locking in.
Okay. But who is he? We don't know his name, but who is he? Nick knew this one right away.
No, I just remembered someone. And I'm going with it. Actually, I remembered 2. Mm-hmm. So I had to guess which one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to lock in with the broad guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's up there somewhere, KJ.
Oh, I know. I keep picturing the generals from Kundun.
The baby was already dead, okay?
Sounds like something Glenn would say. Locked in.
All right, KJ, what's your guess?
Well, before your clue, I was going to say the lady that said he didn't call her back that we had mentioned before. It didn't call back very often. So I'm locking in with that lady.
Okay. Ryan, what do you have?
Yeah, well, I was going to say his sister, but then you said you gave us the clue that was a man. So I'm just going to stay with the same theme and say like it was another family member, his cousin maybe.
Mm-hmm. All right. Jackie, is that his cousin? I think that's what his cousin's name was. And then Nick, what do you have?
Okay, here's my leap of faith. The piano tuner. And some people only give him a few days notice, but he would give him 2 to 3 months notice, which he really appreciated.
And Nick gets it. Well done. He was the piano tuner. All right. So you might wonder why I brought such a specific question.
Well, actually, to interrupt you, Tom, I was trying to figure out how Glenn knew his piano was going to be out of tune in months from here.
I think it's just how I think they go out of tune after a certain period of time.
Okay, so
routine maintenance.
Got it. That makes a lot more
sense. Oil
than
change,
I was like, man,
yeah, he didn't pop a string.
Like how? Okay.
You think he could have just scheduled them annually then? Like come every 3 months.
No.
Yeah.
Right, the guy should have been upset, not.
So, putting that where it needs to be, talking about this scene especially, because I think this scene, what's going on in these interviews, I found really interesting, because it seemed to jump back and forth. Because before we get the piano tuner, whose general thing, as Nick points out, is, yeah, he's very considerate. He always gave me 3 or 4 months. He always, I had this guy call me the other day and he wanted it tomorrow, but Glenn always gave me 3 to 4 months. And the stories right before that are, he never thought about anybody else but himself. He would just call up on the phone and didn't care because he wanted to talk, and he would talk for hours, or he would sing entire operas to people if he wanted to.
That's where I almost went, Tom. The guy who fell asleep while he was on the phone with Glenn Gould, and his son kicked him to wake him up, and Glenn was still talking, not skipping him, missing a beat.
Yeah, that was, I think, the guy before it. But there was a
close, I know.
Well, a friend who was like, yeah, he just didn't care what your normal things were that you needed to do. And I liked how this collection of interviews ended on those 2 notes. It had this kind of contradiction in it, which is this is the 14th, so it's close right to the middle of the feature, and I think it's around the 45-minute mark at a 93-minute movie. And so I was wondering what people thought of that idea of contradiction, or that kind of what we might call, to use Ryan's word, a kind of contrapuntal feel in some of these themes and depictions.
So, Tom, I didn't see it as a contradiction, and now I'm wondering what this says about me. I thought it was, he doesn't care about people, but he cares about the machines he's using.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it kind of finished. It was the conclusion to the point, which was, he struggled to connect with people as people normally connect with each other, right? He connected differently, but he wanted to make sure his piano was still going to work, because that connection was incredibly strong.
The 318, piano 318.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like the movie consistently avoided being negative about him. I just kept waiting for that to, especially, I think the biggest one, the expectation I had was that scene with the autograph, and I was just waiting for him to be a dick. And instead he wasn't. He was, gracious, and but it didn't feel like a put on. He wasn't pretending to be nice to this guy. He just was like, curt, and then, asked him the questions that interested him about his life, and no more, no less. And so, yeah, I felt it was actually pretty generous in like, I got even like his sister saying, like, he would talk for hours and stuff, but it would never, no one seemed to approach him with any bitterness or negativity, which was surprising. In biopics, you're set up to not expect that.
Yeah, you're often set up to be like the downfall, right? The genius, his own ego, blah, blah, blah. And none of that's there. Yeah.
That's in Ryan's sequel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Too soon?
Yes, this would not happen in the 10 interludes about Will Smith.
Oh. Yeah. This is going to be the opposite of that. Oh yeah, that's it. That's a really I really like KJ's reading. I think that's interesting, and I agree with Ryan. There's no, especially in that scene the scene where he signs the autograph. He's another utter gentleman. And what's interesting about that scene is he seems to covet what that old man has, which is, I'm retiring at the end of the season, which ends up being what Gould does. He seems to retire like on the spot. Like, yeah, that sounds good to me. But I like that, KJ. Like that actually completes that thought, that there ends up being this kind of love of machine there, which is also a big thing in that interviews, right? There's that one interviewer in the office with the books, who's talking to him about the machines, how you seem to have this kind of love of machines and media technology, but isn't that just a way to put people at a distance? Yeah. And also
sort of the all that stuff with him, the perfectionism stuff makes, I couldn't help but think of the Beach Boy.
Brian Wilson.
Brian Wilson, but also most recently, a film guys should all watch if you haven't yet, is the Kenny G documentary. And Kenny G also controversially, he performs live all the time, but his recordings are all done in the studio, and he just cuts out parts he doesn't think are good and then replaces them with the good parts. So like what's on the recording is not a live recording, which is, of course, is Glenn Gould's big thing too. So it was just sort of interesting that that whole, seemed to be one of the first that was embracing that technology, and that it was taking away from what was perceived as like how classical music should be recorded, from what I understand.
Another thing I wanted to bring forward, and actually I'd like to hear from Ryan, because I think based upon your word contrapuntal, have a kind of an insight to this, is those kind of various contrapuntal textures. So, this is not too far away, this scene, the cross paths, from, or it's a little earlier, when we get those kind of contrapuntal scenes. The two big ones seem to be Truck Stop, where he goes to get a meal at a local truck stop, and then the recording right after that, the idea of North. And
I actually think the one of him that they play in its entirety, his CBC soundscape, because that is like a contrapuntal recording of non-musical edit. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else to, non-musical media. So that one to me actually seemed like the one that was like the main, like, let's play with this idea of by playing in its entirety his radio piece.
So for those on the show here who knows what contrapuntal is, in Hamilton do they use that? I'm just trying to find something.
Right, KJ, the definition for contrapuntal is polyphonic or of, relating to, or marked by counterpoint. So hopefully that clears it up for you.
Right. No, so in Hamilton, there's have you seen Hamilton, Ryan?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so in Hamilton, there's a scene where
on Disney Plus.
Yeah, where Samuel Avery comes out and reads the letter, and then Lin-Manuel kind of sings against him at the same time. Is that contrapuntal? Are those two melodies playing over each other? Is that? Yeah. I'm just trying to find
I think so. I'm not an expert, but I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So a contrapuntal would be playing of two kind of melodies that.
Hey, Tom, interrupt you. How about Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme? Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh yeah, and they're singing against each other. Yeah. That feels almost like variations, like when you sing like row, row, row your boat, and then when someone gets to boat, the next person starts. Like that one seems a little bit more like they're singing two variations at the same time, but I guess it's kind of the same thing.
If it's two or more independent melodic lines, so they have to be independent. Yeah,
the two lines have to be able to be independent, but they're kind of they're kind of mapped onto each other. And yeah, row, row, row your boat would be a type of contrapuntal texture. I suppose it'd be a simple one, a canon. Yeah, and then I don't remember now the Simon and Garfunkel song, but it sounds like what you're describing.
Go ahead, sing us a few bars, Cage.
Yeah, go for it, Cage.
Well, which part? There's two parts that.
Well done. Yeah, but it sounds like that. I mean, anytime you have more than one instrument playing, it's, I guess, technically counterpoint, right? But it's when you have these kind of separate things that could be independent motives or melodic lines that are on top of each other, it's counterpoint. And so I think what Ryan is pointing up there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of North is what you're hearing is the same thing you would do with instruments, but with human voices.
Oh, was that the one? Is North the name of that short? That's his.
Yeah, it's called the idea of North. Yeah.
Sorry, I was like, no, not that one. The other one. They're the same one.
Yeah. Yeah, the one we're talking about being in the North and it's like very cold, and then the other guy comes in.
Yeah.
And it ends with, and I'm Glenn Gould, and this has been, yeah.
He has multiple ones where he talks about being in the North, so I wasn't sure which one.
Yeah, but the truck stop, I love that one where he goes into it starts with the downtown, the song Downtown. It's the one non-concert music we get. And
I thought that was going to be a question.
I guess he wrote some kind of essay about that song. He was really into that
one. Really? I didn't know that. I don't know
that. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to Google that.
Oh wow, that is a reference I'd missed. Very good. Yeah. Oh, I have to look up his essay. Yeah. Yeah, but that truck stop thing I love, because that seems to be like he was the great interpreter of these kind of contrapuntal textures in people like Bach and Beethoven. And then it seems to be like he's interpreted so much, and now he interprets it in the real world. He sees it and measures the real world. And since the movie is actually using that form, the movie is using counterpoint to interpret Gould. So it becomes the thing interpreted becomes the thing that interprets the person. So I love that sequence, which is like, okay.
You're getting
we gotta look at the time. We gotta
Sorry. So here we are at the final question. Nick is in the lead with 3 points, and Ryan and KJ are right behind. So this really could be anybody's game.
I would love for Nick to win. I'm going to throw it.
Yeah.
It only happens at the most surprising times.
Like, oh yeah, World on a Wire was another one.
There was a recent one, but anyway.
I hope Nick wins too, and I don't think I'll be able to throw it. Like I'm not.
It's time for question 4.
What type of clothing did Glenn introduce to the concert hall? This is mentioned twice in the movie.
I know you were talking about it, but I didn't know that was in the film. Let me think.
Yeah, I remember them talking about it too, but I don't remember the specific clothing they talked about. And as I was thinking about it while watching it, I thought they were talking about the clothing he didn't wear. Not that he wasn't wearing clothing, but when you picture somebody coming out to play the piano, you picture certain clothing, and it wasn't what he was wearing, it was.
You can answer in that way too if you want.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, locked in. I'm locked in.
I'm going to lock in with the backhanded answer.
This is a broad interpretation of what KJ could be saying here. I need a moment. There's a lot on the line here. Okay, I'm going to lock in.
All right, Nick, what do you have?
He did not wear a sport jacket or a suit like tux.
Okay, Ryan, what do you have?
I don't know the answer, so I'm going to show off a tidbit that Eli told me, which is that he sat really low at the piano and like reached up, which is like part of his style was from that. So I'm going to say something with shoes because he was sitting lower than everybody else. So
KJ, what do you have?
I wrote down a coattail suit because, again, I don't remember what they were talking about, but when I picture a concert pianist coming out, there's the flair with the coattail suit as he sits down, and I thought maybe Glenn didn't do that, and they were like, "Man, how can you play the piano without the coattails?"
Okay, I'm going to give KJ the points here. I would have given Nick the points, but Nick said he didn't wear a suit, which is not exactly right.
Sport jacket?
He wore a
That's
sport
what
jacket.
I said.
Yeah, he didn't
wear a sports jacket. He did not wear the coattails.
Yeah, he didn't wear a tuxedo. And he very
But
famous.
KJ didn't say tuxedo. KJ said suit. There's a difference between a tuxedo and a suit.
He had the visual
He
flair
did not use the
sticking out
word
the tail.
tuxedo
He did say the tails. I was going to give him credit for that.
That he did say tails, but he did not say tails. A suit would not have those tails. A tuxedo would have those tails.
Yes.
But anyway.
Well, okay, I'll leave it up to the.
No. We'll go to bonus. Let's go to bonus. Let's go to bonus.
Maybe all suits had tails.
No, it was actually a pretty distinct thing. His refusal to wear a tuxedo, which is mentioned twice. It's mentioned in one of the interviews in Crossed Paths, and it's also mentioned in Gould interviews Gould, where he refers to the tuxedoed fallacy.
KJ was the closest. He said the tails.
So I'm gonna give it to KJ.
I'm happy to give it to KJ.
Yeah, in terms of him being.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, but we do have a tie.
Still was a tux.
And Ryan is free to join in the tie because it's worth 2 points. So you could tie and continue continue everybody's favorite movie.
We usually go 3 points for the bonus question.
How about that? Yeah, let's go 3 points to the bonus.
Yeah,
because Ryan
that gives her
slam dunk it in the end. Can LeBron James it in this final round.
It's time for a bonus question.
How many adequate pianos were there?
Locked in.
Locked in?
Locked in.
All right, KJ, what do you have?
0.
All right, Ryan, what do you have?
I remember the scene, and I feel like that's the only possible answer. None.
I think Nick knows it. Nick, what do you have?
1.
Oh, Nick doesn't know it. Okay. It was 3.
Wait, Price is
Second
Right rules.
tiebreaker.
Price is Right? No.
Oh, Price
No,
is
yeah.
Right. No, let's do second tiebreaker. That's a lot more fun.
Fair.
And then we have a whole lot of things to talk about after this. Okay, let's go for second tiebreaker.
It's time for a bonus question.
This is a question for Nick. I didn't realize it when I wrote it, but it is.
No pressure.
In
no
this
pressure.
97-minute movie.
Yeah.
No. In the third 4.5-minute short.
Mhm.
At what minute marker?
All right. Actually, no, we're going to switch it so we don't.
The question's the question.
No, I have a bunch of bonus questions. We can go all night. For what arrangement did Glenn Gould write his first opus?
Can I get like if this was a math problem, maybe like the units and like a ballpark, like what is a good answer to a question that starts with what arrangement?
Oh, for what instrument?
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Wait, repeat the whole question again.
Yeah. What instrument or instruments did Gould write his first opus?
Locked in.
And this is variation, or I'm sorry, short film 13.
I already locked.
This is the last time I'm watching the movie a week in advance. Just FYI. Feel like I'm operating at a disadvantage here. It was a full week ago. I guess I'll lock in.
All right, Ryan, what do you have?
I mean, I was going to say like harpsichord, but that seems too old-fashioned. So I'm just going to go with pianoforte. So it's not piano, it's some variation of a piano.
All right, Nick, what do you have?
Oh, KJ locked in first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you're right. KJ, what do you have?
So Tom, you mentioned it was number 14, I think.
Hey, are you reading notes?
Number 1
Yeah, I
is
have my notes.
13.
You can't read notes.
13.
Close book.
I want to read his notes then. Can I read his notes?
Yeah, they're all there. It's a Google Doc.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the question. What is Opus 1? It's not. I'm not hiding.
But so what my audience for my notes, every short film I wrote the number and then like my synopsis of it, and I only got the 31. So I either miscounted or the credits counted. I'm not sure. So looking at my notes, it's pretty close to the one with the violins. So I'm gonna go with the violins.
All right, and Nick, what do you have?
Okay. I didn't look at KJ's notes, and it was 3 violins and a cello.
I'm going to give it to both. I mean,
Oh!
KJ, I'll give it to KJ and Nick.
That's so specific.
But it's wrong. It's 2 violins, a viola, and a cello. It's
come.
Well, you can't say I'm more right because I'm more
argue
specific.
that he's more wrong than I am. Then.
Well, I mean, you can't say I'm hanging my hat on the specificity and then get the specifics wrong.
I'm not a musician, okay? I was pretty happy with
Then
cello.
say strings, Fair enough. Okay,
A viola looks like a violin to someone who doesn't know that a viola exists. Okay?
you're getting the points, which means you get the episode, don't you?
No,
No,
it's still tied.
KJ and her are tied still.
Oh, Lord, we're not going to be able to talk about the movie. Okay.
That's fine. I gotta win this damn thing.
Yeah. So let's go for the
Viola, mini violin.
Can we make this one worth 6 points?
Yeah, sure. We'll make it worth 6 points. All right. And I guess we'll do.
I'm out. That was as specific as I could get.
We'll do Nick's question. The question that it privileges Nick.
It does pressure. Too much pressure.
It's time for a bonus question.
What is the stock that Gould bought?
Oh, locked in.
I'm sorry, the what? What is the what?
The stock.
That was my favorite of all the movies.
I was waiting for us to be able to talk about this, Nick.
That was my
I can't believe this didn't
favorite.
come up yet.
That was my favorite of all the scenes.
You know what's funny though is that this is what like Eli came in at one of these parts and he's like, oh, this is just when he's talking about this part. And so like this is like the one scene that I didn't pay a ton of attention to because Eli sort of dismissed it as like, let me generally wrap this scene up to you in one line. And so I don't actually even know, but I know exactly the scene.
Locked in.
Do you want the name or the symbol? Name or the symbol?
You could do either. You're free. So Ryan, what do you have?
Oh, it's some kind of oil stock. I don't know which one.
Okay. KJ, what do you have?
So I don't know exactly, but I really liked the font on the paper of the shot that they did. And I want to say Solex, which doesn't sound like an oil company. It sounds like a solar company, but I'm going to go Solex.
Okay. And Nick, what do you have?
The symbol, because you said I could say name or symbol, was STX. I believe it was Sotox, but STX is my answer.
Yeah, it was so close, KJ. It's Sotex. S-O-T.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, so Nick wins it on a stock question.
Well done. You've been waiting over that one. I was going to say, Nick, how could you dislike this movie with a guy who was so into trading stocks?
That was my favorite scene of the whole film because he was like whispering and spreading rumors about this stock to have it skyrocket while everything else plummeted.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you're right, Tom. That was a Nick question.
That was a Nick question. Yeah, the other one, what was his piano? But I think everybody knew that.
Oh, I said it earlier.
THX11.
318.
Did it remind you that they kept cutting to the number as if it was,
well, especially
like
after
his
you said he
robot
only
buddy?
cared about machines and not people, and then you called it 318. I'm like, that sounds very robotic.
It's time for Movie Rent.
So Ryan, as a person whose partner is classically trained and knows all of this stuff, what was kind of, I'm wondering, if you have anything that you want to say, but if not anything in specific, I'm wondering what your guys' experience was kind of watching this with somebody kind of with this classical experience and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it was just such a big part of his life as a musician. This movie, there's just not that many movies about musicians, especially, he's not a pianist, but even pianists specifically, there's not very many movies about Shine, I guess, being the exception. So maybe there's more about pianists than other ones. but yeah, so, his, I think it was just that them coming from classical music school, they can take they have to take what they can get. But then certainly it was nice to have someone to sort of explain to me what the difference, what you can listen for in a Bach composition versus listening for in a Beethoven composition. I mean, some of the other interesting factors was that none of these songs were composed for piano, so they've all been kind of arranged. It's not as the composer intended them, which is sort of just an interesting aspect about, I guess, all of these musicians, but maybe Glenn Gould's in general, since he's so known for these interpretations of the Goldberg variations. But like so much of this music is every single performance is an interpretation of some kind, because none of it, these instruments didn't exist when they were composed. So that's just like, another aspect of when you were talking about like, think about 3 layers of this film, that's just seems like another third layer that's beneath it all, which is just like that, the history of music, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and the history of interpretation is there.
Right. Yes.
He's a great interpreter, and the movie has this kind of meta structure, meta commentary that it's interpreting him in the same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. That what we're hearing in at least with the Bach is not what he would have heard, not what Bach intended. Yeah.
The other thing was that Glenn Gould's, even when he was playing the music as quote unquote written, that wasn't anything that he had arranged, he brought out sort of like what I would consider like the left hand or the bass line in a way that other people playing the exact same notes didn't. And so it just made it a style that even the everyday music appreciator could spot his style and say like, I know this guy, I know his work. And so, that idea of the way that he played the instrument was just different than everybody else. And so that also kind of came across in just his quirks and eccentricities.
That is cool. There's one recording of the Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata that he plays as a march. That's really kind of wild.
Right.
Yeah, there's kind of and is it what's the second one? The second year that he recorded the Goldbergs? Was it 81?
It was much later. He was an adult. I feel like, I mean, he died in like 87 or something.
He died in 84.
Okay, I mean, I think it was only a couple years before he died, but I'd have to Google it again. But it was like, and they're really different. But yeah, so it was a long time between the two.
It's another thing too, is I think there's only one aspect of the Goldberg variations in the movie. Do I have that correct? I think it's just the aria of all of them that's in the movie.
What is the one where he stops to play from the phone booth? What is that piece that he calls?
Oh, that's from the French. That's from Bach's first.
Oh, it's the French suite.
Bach, but it's the French suite. It's the Sarabande from the first French suite.
Right.
But there is one of the variation 19 is also in it. So there's two. There's the aria and variation 19. Another thing I'd ask you guys: any one film in particular jump out at you? Any favorites amongst them?
I did enjoy that whole stockbroker thing. I also think it's always funny when you see this old school depiction of like what stockbrokers used to be, just sitting around smoking all day, taking in orders, which is not what the world is anymore. But it's really funny to see that stereotype.
How about you, Keitra? Do you have any?
Yeah, I liked it was early on. He was being interviewed by a guy, and Glenn was kind of telling him, "You're doing this all wrong. Like, pick something else besides the music, and then my answers will be interesting and relate back to music."
That was
Glenn interviewing himself. Yeah, sorry, it was him. And himself. That was funny.
Which is actually a thing. That's an excerpt from some thing he did. Yeah.
Oh, he interviewed himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like they'd go back and forth. He'd be in like kind of the shadows and then talking to him. But he was both of the people.
It was. Oh, then that's why it was called Glenn.
Yeah,
probably.
Right, Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross. Yeah. Well, so what I liked about that scene, even though I seem to have missed the point.
Gould meets Gould is what.
Gould meets Gould. So I had my headphones on, and in stereo, it was pretty cool because as the camera was moving or as people were moving, they were playing with the microphone so that it was coming out of different ears. And I really enjoy when people use the movie to and do something different that can only be done in movies. Sometimes it can get obnoxious, but I really like the way it worked in that scene.
So, Ryan, did you have a favorite short?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked so much about the music that, we could keep talking a lot just about the filmmaking style, but I really liked, just the motif of him outside and even when the audio was clearly, synced with, it was audio that had been recorded from something else that now the actor was reciting in a completely different setting that of course is not where it was originally recorded. Like, that's just like something cool you can do with cinema. And I liked him talking about going that segment where he talks about wanting to go up north and spend a whole winter up in the darkness. And, so I liked visually how they just took that out of its original context and put it someplace different, which, is, it was just embracing what this film could embrace was that experimental filmmaking style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it got at the theme, right? That kind of the isolated from the interviewer. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I looked at the director. I was going to say he's not really a household name, but he is an Academy Award winner. This next film was The Red Violin. He is indeed a household name to people of that era.
See, I thought it was Red Viola, but no.
No, violas tend not to be worth what is that, $6 million? I actually saw the Red Violin in concert once. It's not exactly the same violin, but it's what's called the Red Violin.
How did it sound?
I don't have the ear to appreciate it as well as it could, but it was a lovely concert. I'd say that. It was actually at Lake Luzerne of all places.
And Tom, how about you? What was your favorite of the 32 short films?
I don't know if it's my favorite. The one that has been, I guess I could I've been scratching, has been Diary of One Day, which is 18, which is the it follows a Schoenberg piece, a jig from Schoenberg, and it's the recording of the diastolic and systolic heart pressure next to the X-ray of him playing the piano. If anybody remembers that, it's the X-rays he's playing, and there's just the heart rate that keeps appearing. What's interesting about that is the piece of music. I don't know, if anybody knows Arnold Schoenberg, the modernist composer, and he's the one. Gould actually mentions him in the movie. He says, "Schoenberg's speaking to me." He had all these number fears, right, about 13. Well, that's
the guy who thought he was going to die.
Yes. Yeah. So that was Arnold Schoenberg, and that's who you're hearing in that movie. That's whose piece it is, and it sounds like chaos. Schoenberg was what's called a serialist, which meant he wrote like serial or series of notes that were sort of randomly selected, but then very, very precisely put together through the piece of music. However, since they're initially randomly selected, it seems like chaos, even though, in fact, it's actually probably the most carefully ordered music there is, or amongst it. And what I found maybe difficult or interesting about the scene is the fact that there's this sense of disorder in what is actually a very ordered system. There's this kind of these heart rates, because Gould keeps taking his heart. We saw him in that earlier scene where he's measuring his heart rate, and there's this kind of mix and tension between what seems like chaos and might actually be chaos, but is also very measured and very specific and very kind of tediously worried over, which also seems like Gould, and it also seems like the music as well, which, I mean, Bach's music is incredibly like clockwork. The Goldbergs or any of his music is like that. And then you get to Schoenberg, and Gould is a great interpreter not only of Bach but also of Schoenberg, and it's the same kind of complexity and intricacy, but when you hear it, there's a sort of sense of madness there. And I think that ended up being a kind of a great metaphor for the movie.
Well, that's kind of how my heart felt during every single one of those bonus questions. There was a lot on the line, and I always find it awkward to congratulate myself, but I think KJ might have taken a dive there, because I just noticed Coattails is in his notes. So I don't feel as bad between that and the viola. I think I'm going to be okay with my self-congratulations.
During the movie rant, I also noticed it was in my notes. And the way I have my windows arranged is there's some on top of the others, and the Coattails was covered. But I was almost going to, stop the show and say, guys, all three of us could have got it. It was in the...
I just went and saw those notes now and was like, seriously?
You can find more of our content wherever you listen to podcasts, on our YouTube channel, Twitter @Talking Studios, and our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com. We're extremely grateful to all those who subscribe, like, follow, and leave a review. How many short films would it take to describe your life? Let us know on Twitter, talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com, or give us a call at 201-467-8679. Thanks again, Ryan, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I think specifically you added a lot of value in understanding Tom's language and the language of this film.
I think I just regurgitated the 5 things I learned in the last week since watching this movie, but thanks.
You sold it. You sold it.
Are you working on any projects now, Ryan?
Yes, I'm working on a great documentary coming to your local PBS station called Big Sonia. So check your local listings. We'll be playing on a screen near you sometime at the end of April.
Awesome.
And you can find me on Twitter at ThomasLehman15. And I'm working on a B-side right now, so that will be out sometime in the next year.
32 long B-sides by Tom Lehman is the... You can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time for Talking Trivia, where we take a break from looking at just one movie and do actual movie trivia from a variety of films. Stay tuned for a sample trivia question.
Ding, 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 ding.
The second round of questions will be related to the movie Moana. Maui was able to pull up the sky, steal fire from down below, lasso the sun, and harness the breeze. What does he say to this? Chris.
You're welcome.
Correct.
Oh, I was gonna say that.
Points on the board.
What does he say to this? Like, that's a weird way to ask that question.
You're welcome.
At least you didn't ask me to sing it.
And no
I
one
literally
will.
just referenced how I enjoyed that song too. I like to go into the movies kind of blind. I actually don't like to have background, and that this may be not the best example of a film in which you can do that. Because I didn't even know at first if he was a fictional character. Okay.